This is a Mr. E adventure story. You can follow Mr. E and his fantastic team friends, Miss Bisby, Robin, Jeff, Woody, Skye, and Spike in your very own book. It's easy. Read along. When you hear this tone, it means turn the page. Now here's Mr. E. Ever do something you knew was wrong, but you did it because it made you giggle? Well, this is a tale called The Mystery of the Forbidden Monastery. We were on our way to eat meat. There was no meat. Sound confusing? One of our team members knew where my prime rib was. It ended up leading us into a mess of trouble. Here was the story. Mr. E and the team drove for days through the dry, hot desert. Finally, they arrived in enchanted Genola, Utah. Mr. E had recently flooded the bus with the strange scent of his colon, because of the large breakfast burrito he had been eating that morning. Everyone jumped quickly out of the bus to escape the gas and to take a look around. Which way do we eat meat? Mr. E asked the gas station attendant. There's no meat in this town. Only white wheat bread, was the man's reply. What? You must be mistaken. Mr. E makes delicious bacon, Robin said. Sorry, you're mistaken. There's no meat here, the man repeated. The team was stunned. How were they going to eat meat when there was no meat? What were they going to eat now? Skye suggested that they eat something before heading home. She said she conveniently grew up on a cotton plantation in the area and knew that there was a Taco Bell just down the street. Mr. E asked if there was any place in the area to get a Pellegrino, but no one knew what that was, so they all shrugged. They were about to board the bus when they noticed a monk peering from behind the corner of a dumpster as if hiding. He looked right, then left, then up, then down, and darted past the team out into the street. That guy must really want a Pellegrino, Mr. E exclaimed. Suddenly, a used ambulance that someone bought off eBay and drove across the country without a license plate or insurance raced down the street and screeched to a halt. The ambulance was driven by an evil-looking man called Largo Shfinkto. Two men dressed as monks jumped out of the ambulance, grabbed the running monk, and pushed him inside. The ambulance roared away with its siren screeching. Mr. E could tell that the monk who was hiding didn't want to go with the others, or he wouldn't have been trying to run away. Either that, or they all knew where he could get some Pellegrino. So Mr. E decided to find out what was going on. He hopped into the bus and slammed the door, but not before Woody slipped in. They chased the ambulance into the desert. It wasn't very hard because the sirens were still blaring. Just when they were about to catch up, kaboom! Mr. E blew out gas. Woody screamed like a little girl and the bus swerved out of control and landed in a ditch. The ambulance drove away, leaving a trail of dust. It would take hours for Mr. E and Woody to air out the bus and get back on the road. Meanwhile, in town, it was getting dark and Mr. E hadn't returned. Miss Bisby took the team over to Taco Bell to get something to eat for the night. In the lobby, Skye was approached by an Indian who handed her a message. Of course no one noticed this. Skye quickly stuffed the note into her jacket pocket, looked around the Taco Bell to make sure no one saw her, and then went and ordered some nachos. Mr. E and Woody still hadn't returned. This didn't really bother anyone, but they figured that they should probably talk about it anyway. Outside the window they could see the hauntingly dim lights in the monastery window. Skye told the kids about the ancient monastery. Poor monks live there, she said. Like the ones Mr. E and Woody went after, Jeff exclaimed. Mr. E and Woody might be there now. They could have our meat, Robin said. Spike spoke gruff like Mr. E and said, Oh boy! Skye pulled on her jacket, not seeing that the note had happened to fall out of her pocket. The team snuck out into the cold Utah air. The team climbed up the high mesa to the monastery. They were certain that Mr. E and Woody were there somewhere eating meat. They entered through an old door and quietly made their way down a long, dark hallway. It led to a giant room full of boxes marked POS Video. TVs! What are monks doing with so many old, lame TVs? Asked Jeff. Robin, Jeff, Skye, and Spike explored the giant storage room. They discovered a secret passage. Cobwebs hung in their faces as they quietly crept down the passageway. At the end, they found a heavy wooden door, and behind that door, they found 5 famous people that everybody thinks are dead, dressed as monks, locked in a jail cell. Steve Jobs told the team that they had been imprisoned by a group of clones who were impersonating monks and using the monastery as a base to smuggle stolen Pellegrino and POS TV boxes from Mexico. Steve Jobs had no idea why they had been captured, or why they were being forced to dress as monks, or why his face was black and white. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door behind the kids slammed shut. The team of celebrities spun around to see the evil face of Largo Shfinkto glaring through a small hatch in the door at them.
Now that you have found about my man-crush on Steve Jobs, I promise you will live to regret it,
Largo Shfinkto said as he closed the hatch. Meanwhile, Mr. E and Woody finally repaired the bus and returned to town. They found Miss Bisby pacing in the Taco Bell.
The kids are gone.
Maybe it has something to do with this strange note that was left right where I would find it, and I decided that rather than call the police, I would just wait for you to get here. That I found in Skye's room, Miss Bisby offered. The note read, "Help us. The eagle lands on the monastery at midnight."
Come on, Woody. We're going to pay some monks a visit,
Mr. E said. Things looked pretty bad for the team. They hadn't gone this long without meat in years. The kids huddled together. It seemed escape was impossible. No one knew where they were. Suddenly, bash! The heavy wooden door splintered into 1,352 pieces, and there stood Mr. E and Woody. Mr. E ripped the jail cell door off its hinges and threw it over his shoulder.
You are free,
Mr. E said.
Lucky you were in here when I passed gas a second ago. Smells like carrots and dead puppies.
The celebrities told Mr. E about the clones. Mr. E and the kids charged out after the smugglers. The crooks were on the roof. A helicopter hovered above as a net full of TV boxes full of Pellegrino was being hoisted aboard. "That's what the note meant by the eagle lands on the monastery at midnight," Skye exclaimed.
You know more about this than you let on,
said Mr. E.
and you can explain later.
With a great bound, Mr. E leapt up and swung himself aboard the helicopter.
Give me the Pellegrino!
He roared. He reached in and shoved the crooks out one side, and pulled the control lever back. The helicopter landed with a crash.
Now it's time to cart these turkeys away,
Mr. E said. The bus bounced over the dusty desert road on its way home. Mr. E explained to Miss Bisby about Largo Shfinkto's man-crush on Steve Jobs. They giggled. Skye admitted that a friend had called weeks before and told her about Largo Shfinkto's man-crush on Steve Jobs. Skye wanted to see for herself, but knew that Mr. E would never allow the team to go looking for dead people. So she made up the phony meet to get the team to Genoa, Utah. The team forgave Skye. They were happy to have helped the celebrities, and thought it was the best case they ever solved.
So everything turned out okay. But listen up. Think twice before you lie about me. You might be getting yourself and your friends into a bus with a stinking man. Do what's right, and you certainly can't go wrong. Take it from me, Mr. E.